What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Ride USA, and on today's video we're going to be reviewing quite possibly one of the best, if not the best, pit bikes on the market. So this is the Kawasaki KLX110L, which is really the upgraded version of the KLX110 that's geared towards larger, more experienced riders. So in this video we're going to go over the basic specs of the bike, its performance in the woods as well as the track, and also some testing the reliability and suggesting, some kind of must-to-do mods to achieve peak performance on this motorcycle. So before we dive into what makes this bike so great, let's begin with the basic specs. It's a 4-stroke 112cc air-cooled machine with a 4-speed transmission that is a manual transmission because it does have a clutch. The 110L produces roughly 7 horsepower and 6 pound-feet of torque. It was introduced by Kawasaki back in 2010 and has remained relatively unchanged since then, besides some basic graphic and plastic modifications. Now, what differentiates the 110L from the standard 110 is that this bike comes with larger suspension and a manual clutch right from the factory. Now, typically these modifications are done to standard 110s in order to make them better suited for larger, more experienced riders. And, to think about it, if you're starting with a basic 110 and want to raise the suspension and add in a clutch, it can be pretty costly and require quite a bit of expertise and mechanical ability to do so. Therefore, the fact that Kawasaki offers this right from the factory means that this bike is already a step ahead against every other 110 on the market. The TTR 110, the CRF 110, the DRZ 110, and even the standard KLX 110 all have over an inch less of suspension travel than the 110L and are automatic transmission, meaning that there is no manual clutch. The benefit of adding a clutch allows you to optimize the power delivery and give you more control over the motorcycle. Personally, I enjoy using the clutch to wheelie or get out of tough situations where you need a quick boost of power to lift up the front end. That is why, as an experienced rider, I cannot imagine buying any other 110 since all of them, from the big manufacturers are automatic. However, all bikes have their place, and I'm really intrigued by the fuel injection that is now offered in the CRF 110, but that's for a later video. Now that we've gone over some basic specs and what separates this motorcycle from its competition, let's go over how the KLX110L performs. It is significantly more comfortable with its larger seat height, and suspension travel does a wonderful job at soaking up jumps and bumps out on the trail. I had no problem jumping the bike and landing flat, and it bottomed out actually a lot less than my XR100, which is a full-size bike in a sense. It's more of a trail bike, but again, later topic. The power delivery on this bike is really nice as well. It has a great bottom end that allows you to lift up the front wheel even without popping the clutch. I find that the power delivery on the 110L is actually a lot more enjoyable than the XR100 or even the KLX140. Surprisingly, the KLX140 and the KLX110L have roughly the same torque figures on the dyno, but the smaller size and smaller wheels on the 110L just makes it feel like I'm going faster. I found this bike does a great job out on the trail, and we even took it out to a local MX track where, although it was out of its element, it happened to do just fine. The bike cleared most of the smaller jumps and was even beating out some of the 65s on the track. It had a tough time on the pro track, but on the mini track it seemed to be right at home. So in terms of reliability of this machine, I need to start off by clarifying that we bought our bike used and it was in pretty rough shape, so I can't entirely speak for its long-term reliability. However, we did have a lot of problems with the bike that does caution me to purchase another. Here are some of the issues that I encountered during my first year of ownership of the KLX110L. First, the steering bearings went bad. The electric start didn't work, the pads holding the rear sprocket got chewed up, which eventually caused the whole rear brake assembly to blow up while I was riding it. It had a pretty weird noise to it, the clutch slipped a lot and was extremely warm, the float needle in the carb went bad and it started leaking gas. This had a weird little quirk to it too. It would leak oil if it was dropped on the right side of the bike, which was very odd. So we kind of had to know that if you were going to drop the bike, to try to drop it to the left side to keep it from leaking oil. Something that I've never encountered before, so very weird. Also, the bolts holding the foot pegs into place on the motor mount would come loose a lot. The front wheel would come loose a lot too, which is very scary. And then finally, the tab holding the exhaust into place, the actual metal piece, ended up snapping and it had to be re-welded on. Now, a lot of this may be attributed to the fact that it was used and in rough shape when I bought it, and maybe it just got worse over time. However, I do know that others had the same issue of the exhaust tab breaking, as it's just poorly engineered. Based off my experience, the reliability is not great. Like I said, I did buy it used, and nonetheless, it had more than 10 problems in just the first year of ownership. Now, if you are going to buy new, I'm not sure. It's probably a totally different story since it is, a single-cylinder, 4-stroke air-cooled engine, which are notorious for their reliability and is made by a pretty reputable manufacturer. But if you are going to buy used, I just warn you to be cautious and do your research on finding the right bike. In conclusion, the KLX110L is a great pit bike for anyone looking to start out riding and is even a better option for someone looking to get a pit bike to accompany their race bike. It performs great, handles great, and is really just a blast to ride. Reliability does concern me, but would I buy another? Absolutely. In fact, I do not think that there is another 110 that I would honestly buy. The upgraded suspension and clutch from the factory is just such a deal breaker for me, and it makes it way more enjoyable to ride. Now let's see how this bike stacked up on the Let's Ride USA grading scale. Keep in mind this scale is subjective to what the bike is, and what the bike is a 110cc pit bike. I grade all my bikes in relation to the category of bike I am reviewing, and in this category we are in air-cooled trail bikes. With that being said, let's go ahead and look at the results. It got a 4 out of 5 for power. Now I'm using a Pro Circuit exhaust and actually a bigger carburetor. However, I assume it would receive a 3 out of 5 if it was stock, but I'm going to leave it at a 4 out of 5 because these are pretty typical mods, and if you're buying a bike used, it's pretty common that you're going to come across similar mods. Handling on this bike is great, but it can be awkward at times, especially if you're running stock bars. Regardless, it is so fun to throw around into corners, pop a wheelie. It gets a 3 out of 5 for handling. Suspension, I really enjoyed, and I was really impressed on how well it did at the MX track, giving it a 4 out of 5. As mentioned, the reliability, in my experience, was an issue, which gave it a 2 out of 5. I think the bike looks sweet and is probably the best looking 110 out there from the factory, giving it a 5 out of 5. Finally, this bike is just way too fun. I had more fun on this bike than the XR100 and CRF50, but the reliability of working on it more than I actually rode it gives it a 4 out of 5. This totals up to a score of 22 out of 30, which means it received a 70% on the scale. Like I said before, it's an awesome bike, and if you're looking to get a 110 from one of the big manufacturers, this is the way to go. This was another motorcycle review brought to you by Let's Ride USA, and we will see you guys in the next video.